It was supposed to be a routine courtroom session, another day, another case. But what unfolded between Judge Andrew Napolitano and Senator John Kennedy became one of the most talked about moments in recent political history, a clash of pride, principle, and unexpected humility that left an entire courtroom speechless. The air inside the courtroom was tense, cameras were rolling, journalists leaned forward, and even the guards near the door seemed to sense that something unusual was about to happen. Judge Napolitano, known for his firm hand and uncompromising adherence to procedure, sat high on the bench. Before him stood Senator John Kennedy, a man equally famous for his sharp wit, Southern charm, and unwavering sense of justice. The case itself was minor. At least on paper. It involved a fine against Kennedy's campaign committee over an alleged procedural violation during a fundraising event. The amount wasn't staggering, but the principle behind it, the idea that Kennedy had supposedly acted above the law, had struck a nerve. As the judge read the ruling, his voice echoed through the chamber. Senator Kennedy, Napolitano began sternly, "No one is above the law. Regardless of your position, this court finds you liable for the infraction. You are hereby fined $25,000, payable immediately." There was a murmur among the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. Kennedy didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and looked straight at the judge. The silence was heavy, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound like a drum. "Your Honor," Kennedy said calmly, his Louisiana drawl deliberate and steady, "I respect the law more than most men, but I also respect truth, and when the law is used not as a tool of justice, but as a weapon of pride, then it loses its meaning." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Napolitano's expression tightened. He was not a man used to being challenged, especially not by a sitting senator. "Are you suggesting this court is unjust?" he demanded. Kennedy smiled faintly. "I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that sometimes justice wears a robe and forgets it still has a heart beneath it." The words hit hard. Even the stenographer paused, blinking back what might have been surprise or admiration. Kennedy reached into his briefcase, pulled out a personal checkbook, and began writing. He signed the check and walked it over to the bailiff, but instead of leaving it there, he turned back to face the judge once more. "I'll pay this fine right now," Kennedy said, holding the check up for all to see. "But I'll also match it and donate the same amount to the Legal Aid Society of this state. Because while men like me can afford a fine, there are thousands of citizens who can't afford a lawyer when they're fined unfairly." The room went silent. Even the usually stoic Judge Napolitano seemed taken aback. Kennedy continued, his voice now carrying emotion that trembled between restraint and conviction. "I grew up watching my neighbors lose their farms, their homes, their hope, not because they broke the law, but because no one stood up for them when the law broke them. If this fine reminds me to keep fighting for those people, then maybe it's worth paying twice." What followed was a long pause, the kind that changes everything. Napolitano leaned back, visibly struggling between pride and principle. Finally, he spoke, his tone softer. "Senator Kennedy," he said slowly, "this court respects your gesture. Perhaps a broken bar, perhaps justice does need to listen as much as it speaks." A small, rare smile crossed the judge's face. "Your fine stands, but so does your point." The tension in the room broke, replaced by something unexpected, a respect. The crowd began to murmur again, but this time with admiration. Even the reporters seemed unsure whether to write it as a courtroom clash or a moment of unity. As Kennedy turned to leave, a young law student who had been watching from the back stood and began to clap. One by one, others followed. It wasn't loud or theatrical, just a quiet, heartfelt acknowledgement of courage. Outside, cameras swarmed Kennedy, microphones flashing in his face. But he didn't gloat. He simply said, "The law is meant to serve people, not silence them. I paid the fine, now I hope we all remember the lesson." That night, the clip of the confrontation spread across social media like wildfire. Some called it a political stunt, others called it a masterclass in integrity. But for most viewers, it felt like something deeper, a rare reminder that leadership isn't about winning arguments, but standing for something even when the odds are stacked against you. Weeks later, Judge Napolitano invited Kennedy for a private meeting. What they discussed was never made public, but sources close to both the men confirmed it was respectful and even friendly. One insider said the two spoke at length about justice, compassion, and how easily one can lose sight of the human face behind every case file. By the end of that meeting, both men reportedly shook hands. For many, the story became a symbol of accountability, a reminder that even the most powerful voices can find common ground when humility enters the room. Kennedy's defiance didn't just make a judge reconsider, it reignited faith and the idea that courage and compassion can coexist, even in a courtroom. And for those who watched that day, one message lingered long after the cameras turned off: true justice isn't about who wins, it's about who dares to do what's right, even when the world is watching.